We're in Genesis 42 tonight. Genesis 42. You don't remember that we finished Genesis 41? Don't I have memorable lessons? Have you ever heard the expression, there's more month at the end of the money? You ever heard of that? There's more month at the end of the money. It's meant to express when the money that was budgeted didn't stretch as far as we thought it would. Have you ever come up to that time and had to sacrifice maybe some grocery items or something? Now, the situations we may have been in are not as dire as what we're about to read today with a famine that's going through the land and Joseph's brothers needing to go to another country to seek food. But I'm sure coming up short in a month has probably happened to all of us, maybe multiple times. And when it happened, we had to decide what we were willing to go without, what we couldn't do without, and how we were going to walk that line. So keep that in mind as we go through this chapter. But before we go through the chapter, let me ask you another question. Has a sibling ever done something to you, maybe as innocent as a prank, maybe as serious as, well, something serious, and the opportunity came across to you that you could take revenge? Did you take that revenge? Did you let it slide? Maybe something in between? There was I think I've probably shared this story before, but when I was younger, my brother would tease me, and I only have one older brother. He would tease me all the time and call me Jessica. I didn't like that. I'd always tell him to stop, but he wouldn't stop, and so finally I decided I was going to respond in kind. I was going to get my revenge, and so he called me Jessica, and I said, well, yeah, how about Andrewica? Showed him, huh? Okay, so that's not as serious. And it definitely pales in comparison to what Joseph's brothers did to him. I mean, at least my brother never sold me into slavery and told my parents that I died, right? I mean, everything kind of pales in comparison to that. But today we're going to see an opportunity plop into Joseph's lap for him to take revenge. So let's look at how he handles it, and let's see what happens to this family. So let's read through Genesis 42. When Jacob learned that there was grain for sale in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you look at one another?" And he said, "Behold, I have heard that there is grain for sale in Egypt. Go down and buy grain for us there, that we may live and not die." So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt. But Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother, with his brothers, for he feared that harm might happen to him. Thus the sons of Israel came to buy among the others who came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. Now Joseph was governor over the land. He was the one who had sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed themselves before him with their faces to the ground. Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them, but he treated them like strangers and spoke roughly to them. "Where do you come from?" he said. They said, "From the land of Canaan, to buy food." And Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. And Joseph remembered the dreams that he had dreamed of them, and he said to them, "You are spies. You have come to see the nakedness of the land." They said to him, "No, my lord, your servants have come to buy food. We are all sons of one man. We are honest men. Your servants have never been spies." He said to them, "No, it is the nakedness of the land that you have come to see." And they said, "We, your servants, are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And behold, the youngest is this day with our father, and one is no more." But Joseph said to them, "It is as I said to you, you are spies. By this you shall be tested. By the life of Pharaoh you shall not go from this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you and let him bring your brother while you remain confined, that your words may be tested whether there is truth in you, or else by the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies." And he put them all together in custody for 3 days. On the 3rd day Joseph said to them, "Do this, and you will live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers remain confined where you are in custody, and let the rest go and carry grain for the famine of your households, and bring your youngest brother to me, so that the words will be verified, and you shall not die." And they did so. Then they said to one another, "In truth, we are guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the distress of his soul when he begged us, and we did not listen. That is why this distress has come upon us. And Reuben answered them, Did I not tell you not to sin against the boy? But you did not listen. So now there comes a reckoning for his blood. They did not know that Joseph understood them, for there was an interpreter between them. Then he turned away from them and wept. And he returned to them and spoke to them. And he took Simeon from them and bound him before their eyes. And Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain and to replace every man's money in his sack and to give them provisions for the journey. This was done for them. Then they loaded their donkeys with their grain and departed. And as one of them opened his sack to give his donkey fodder at the lodging place, he saw his money in the mouth of the sack. He said to his brothers, My money has been put back. Here it is in the mouth of my sack. At this their hearts failed them, and they turned trembling to one another. What is this that God has done to us? When they came to Jacob their father in the land of Canaan, they told him all that had happened to them, saying, The man, the Lord of the land, spoke roughly to us, and took us to be spies of the land. But we said to him, We are honest men, we have never been spies. We are 12 brothers, sons of our father. One is no more, and the youngest is this day with our father in the land of Canaan. Then the man, the Lord of the land, said to us, By this I shall know that you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers with me, and take grain for the famine of your households, and go your way. Bring your youngest brother to me, then I shall know that you are not spies, but honest men, and I will deliver your brother to you, and you shall trade in the land. As they emptied their sacks, behold, every man's bundle of money was in his sack. And when they and their father saw their bundles of money, they were afraid. And Jacob their father said to them, You have bereaved me of my children. Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more, and now you would take Benjamin. All this has come against me. Then Reuben said to his father, Kill my 2 sons if I do not bring him back to you. Put him in my hands, and I will bring him back to you. But he said, My son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he is the only one left. If harm should happen to him on the journey that you are to make, you would bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to Sheol. All right. So, the events here seem to begin at the time when the news first reached Canaan that grain was being sold in Egypt. Apparently, Jacob and his sons have not discussed this before this chapter took place. Also, the family seems to have arrived at the point where something had to be done about the famine. So look at what Jacob says to his sons in verse 1. What does he say here? He says essentially, basically he's just asking why they're standing around, right? What are you guys doing? They must have been looking at each other, waiting for one of them to suggest the next course of action. Maybe they were thinking that they didn't want to go all the way to Egypt. Maybe they were thinking that Egypt was the land to which Joseph was sold into slavery, and so maybe they were trying to avoid that place. Maybe none of them wanted to take charge of this mission. Whatever they were thinking, Jacob is trying to snap them out of it. So look at what Jacob says in verse 2. How serious are their circumstances, according to verse 2? They're going to die. Yeah, this was life or death. They must have been starving. And Jacob continues to be the man of decision. I mean, he knows how to act in different situations, and he firmly holds on to his position as the head of the family. And since men had begun to go down to Egypt to buy grain, that was the best course to follow. And so he commands his sons to take this trip and to make the necessary purchases. How many brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt? 10. Who stayed home? Benjamin. And why? He feared what would happen to him, right? Now, Jacob didn't really have a clue what the brothers did to Joseph. If he had, I think we most likely would have heard about it by now, and how he reacted to it. And so I don't think he was afraid that the brothers would harm Benjamin. Instead, Benjamin was the last living son of his wife, Rachel. He is guarding Benjamin with an apprehensiveness that has grown out of losing his son, Joseph. He was afraid. The journey was long. There's natural dangers to making this type of journey. He wanted to keep Benjamin safe. So I think this is just a natural reaction of a parent in these circumstances. Now, verse 5 makes us aware of the fact that there were many were going down to Egypt on the same mission as Jacob's sons. The Hebrew here literally says that the 10 came in the midst of the coming ones. That's what it literally says, in the midst of the coming ones. So there must have been kind of a steady stream of people going down to Egypt, like a caravan. And Joseph was acting as governor over the land. And actually, he was acting in a double capacity. He was both the governor and the one who sold grain. He personally managed the sale of grain. That would include, I think, probably some pretty meticulous attention to the detail that was probably required of him in this situation to know exactly how much grain was going out and to whom. And so here we learn that sometimes it's okay to micromanage. I'm just kidding. But his selling of grain brought him into direct contact with his brothers. And what did his brothers do before him? Yeah, they bowed down. The Hebrew word for bowed themselves is the exact same word used in Genesis 37, verse 7, where Joseph dreamed of the sheaves bowing down to his sheaf. And so his dream had come to pass. This reminds us of two things. In fact, this is going to be all three of our lessons for today right here. This reminds us that God is faithful. He had given Joseph a dream decades ago that finally came to pass. God is omniscient. Nope. I mean, he is, but God is... No, it's omniscient. For a second there, I thought that meant all present. I don't know what I was thinking. Omniscient, meaning all-knowing. He knew exactly what was going to happen in the future. And finally, God is omnipotent. He's powerful enough to make the things happen that he says are going to happen. He revealed the future to Joseph in a dream. And in his power and in his faithfulness, he made sure that it came to pass. That's the awesomeness of our God. And so Joseph recognizes his brothers. The last time he had seen them, they were full-grown men. You know, there aren't many changes that occur in full-grown men between, the ages of like 30 to 50 or whatever. The age range that his brothers would easily fall into. But the last time he saw his brothers, they were selling him into slavery. So not only did he know what they looked like, he also recognized how they dressed. They didn't dress like the Egyptians, and being set apart by God meant that they didn't mix with the other Canaanites as well. Did he welcome them with open arms? No. No, he treated them as strangers. And how did he speak to them? It says this over and over again. How did he speak to them? Through an interpreter, but roughly. Yeah. Very harshly, depending on your translation. Now, I doubt that Joseph had any anger here or was trying to get revenge on his brothers. We're going to see in a few chapters that he embraces them with open arms and weeps before them. We also see him attribute everything that has happened in his life to God. And also, for at least the last 7 to 8 years, if not more, Joseph had been living in a life of luxury and power and authority as Pharaoh's right-hand man. Remember, they had 7 years of plenty that Joseph oversaw everything as Pharaoh's right-hand man. So 7 years of just living kind of in the lap of luxury. Any anger or need for revenge that he had for his brothers has probably dissipated by now. I think the reason that he pretended to be a stranger and spoke harshly to them was because although he had changed, he didn't know if his brothers had changed. He didn't know how they would act, react, or anything else if they knew who he was. Now, most scholars note that Egyptians are inclined to view all foreigners with suspicion, or I should say the ancient Egyptians did this. Any foreigners were regarded as potential enemies. And if all foreigners were potential enemies, then the natural question arises, where do they come from, right? And so Joseph would ask his brothers that question. He says, where do you come from? How do the brothers answer this question? Say they're from the land of Canaan. And they state their purpose, to buy food. I think this is a classic oversharing of information to try and disarm suspicion. I mean, their purpose was harmless. They hoped to just kind of blend into the crowd of people who had come to do the exact same thing. And yet they're probably wondering, why are we the ones who are being singled out? Verse 8 shows that, again, that Joseph recognized his brothers, but his brothers didn't recognize him. This was to emphasize the point. They had no clue that this was Joseph. They would never have thought that the most powerful person in Egypt was the 17-year-old boy, now over 35 years old, who they had sold into slavery. But look at verse 9. What did Joseph remember? Yeah, he remembered his dreams. He remembered the dreams that he had over 2 decades before that moment. How many people remember dreams that you had 2 decades ago? Not all of them really stick with us, right? This one I'm sure would have anyways, but I'm inclined to believe, though, that this was a God thing, that God had brought these dreams into Joseph's memory at this exact time for this exact purpose. God was reminding him of everything that had happened in his life, that it was for two moments, because he had 2 dreams. His first dream had just come true. But what about his second dream? Do you remember what his second dream was about? Yeah, then his father came. Let me quick read that. It's Genesis 37, verse 9. Genesis 37, verse 9. Then he dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers and said, Behold, I have dreamed another dream. Behold, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me. I'm just going to pause there. Go back up if you've already turned to it. Go back up to verse 6 of the same chapter. He said to them, Hear this dream that I have dreamed. Behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and behold, my sheaf rose and stood upright, and behold, your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf. Look at those two dreams for just a second. Verse 7, verse 9. There's something very important that's changed between the two. Do you see what it is? There's an element missing in the first one that is present in the second one. It's a number. In the first one, he says, Your sheaves bow down to my sheaf. In the second one, he says, the sun, moon, and how many? 11, right? How many brothers just came with Joseph to? Only 10. So this number 11 is very important now, right? Joseph is just realizing that this first dream has just come true. And now he's probably thinking, okay, there's a second dream. And there's a sun and moon, so he's probably thinking parents there. And there's 11 stars that are supposed to bow down to me next. But there's only 10 brothers here. What's going on? So, again, the sun and moon probably referred to Jacob and probably Bilhah, who would have stepped into the role of helping to raise Joseph when Rachel died. They weren't there either. And so reminding Joseph of his dreams had the effect of saying that they were close, I think, to the finish line. But they hadn't crossed it yet. One dream had come to pass, the other still needed to come to pass. But Joseph still needed to find out why Benjamin wasn't with them. After all, Benjamin might have become Jacob's new favorite after Joseph left, or after his disappearance. And if his brothers barely stopped short of murder the first time, maybe they didn't stop short a second time. And so he accuses them of being spies. Saying that they had come to see the nakedness of the land was to say that they were looking for weak spots in the nation and their defenses. So coming back to Genesis 42, let's just look at verse 10 again. They said to him, No, my lord, your servants have come to buy food. We are all sons of one man. We are honest men. Your servants have never been spies. He said to them, No, it is the nakedness of the land that you have come to see. And they said, We, your servants, are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And behold, the youngest is this day with our father, and one is no more. But Joseph said to them, It is as I said to you, you are spies. Now, I imagine the fear, anxiety, and nervousness kind of rising in the brothers throughout this interaction, don't you? The most powerful person in the land is accusing them of being spies. And so they reiterate to him again that they are why they are there, and that they are trying to dissipate this accusation. So what's the first thing they say at the start of verse 11? We are all what? The sons of one man. Now this is important. If they had been sent out as spies, no father would have sent out all of his sons on such a dangerous mission. Having sons to carry on the name of the father was an important thing back then, maybe even today. And at any rate, they wouldn't all travel in one group together if they were spies. So that's their first kind of line of defense. No, we're all the sons of one man. But Joseph didn't listen to what they said because he really didn't care. He just reiterates in verse 12 what he said in verse 9. And so the brothers try to give even more detail. This is gratuitous honesty. They reveal that they are really 12 sons. They are the sons of one man, which implies that they do not all have the same mother. But they're from Canaan. The youngest is with their father, that piece of information that Joseph is most likely searching for. And one is no more. See, with everything else being very specific, this last statement, I think, is very vague. You know, we are all the sons of one man. We're from the land of Canaan. The youngest is with our father. Ones we don't talk about. For my kids, we don't talk about Joseph. We don't talk about Bruno. We don't talk about Joseph. Yeah, very vague. And they must have thought that since they hadn't heard from or about him in the last 20 years, he must have perished. Did Joseph listen to them, though? Not really. What did he accuse them of at the end of verse 14? Again, yeah, you are spies. But Joseph does seem to relent slightly, and he proposes a test, a pretty unreasonable test. Remember that the journey between Egypt and where Jacob and Benjamin were staying was long and was dangerous. One person traveling alone would be engaging in a very dangerous journey, a perilous one. You needed to travel in numbers, strength in numbers. And picture this from the brothers' perspective. What would stop this Egyptian official from arresting the youngest brother as well and keeping him in jail? But if Benjamin was brought to Egypt, what would that do for Joseph? He would have confirmation exactly that he was alive. But there is an interesting phrase that Joseph repeats twice in verses 15 to 17. Once in verse 15 and once at the end of verse 16. What is it? By the life of Pharaoh. Joseph is using Pharaoh as his oath. Now, some commentators take issue with this. How could Joseph swear by Pharaoh and not by God? But Joseph is playing the part of an Egyptian official right now. He is intentionally being a stranger to his brothers and acting as if he didn't know anything about them or about the true God. An Egyptian official, in his capacity, would swear by the life of Pharaoh. I think he only does this to deceive his brothers. And the oath that he swears is not that his brothers would be imprisoned, only that they will be put to the test in the first case, and in the second case, that if they can't produce their brother, maybe Joseph intended to treat them as if they were spies. And then to give them a taste of what he went through and what they would go through if they didn't produce their brother, he puts them in jail for 3 days. So maybe there was a little revenge on Joseph's part. Just a little bit. But then on the third day, Joseph comes to them and tells them that he fears who? He fears God. Now, Joseph uses the word Elohim here. In the Old Testament, Elohim is a general word for God. We tend to think of it as a name of God now, and for the most part that's true. But even when they say, you've gone after other gods, lowercase g gods, they'll still use the word Elohim there in the Hebrew. So he uses the word Elohim here. It's a general word, and it could be used for any lowercase god in other cultures. In fact, Jacob uses this word in Genesis 31, verse 32, when talking to Laban about the idols that Rachel stole. He says, "Anyone with whom you find your Elohim, gods, shall not live." In the presence of our kinsmen, point out what I have taken that is yours and take it." Now Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen them. So that word, God's, in this verse is Elohim. So for all the brothers knew, Joseph was referring to an Egyptian god. He is maintaining his deception. And he modifies their test. Instead of 1 going and 9 staying, he reverses it. 9 can go and 1 can stay. But he makes the consequences more severe. Instead of bringing the brother so that they might not be imprisoned, they must bring the brother so that the one who stays won't die. The life of the brother who stays is now on the line. And what does this whole situation lead to? We'll look at verses 21 to 22. The brothers start talking about someone. Who are they talking about? Joseph. This whole situation brought Joseph to their minds. They were in the land where they had sold him into slavery. They were in jail. Their youngest brother, by the same mother as Joseph, was being singled out. They couldn't help but think of Joseph. And as they talk about him, we get some new information. They saw how Joseph reacted to being sold into slavery. They heard him beg them not to do it, and they ignored it. Importantly, though, they admit guilt. They know that they had done wrong and were deserving of punishment. And Reuben essentially tells them, "I told you so. I was right, and you should have listened to me." See, there's nothing new, right? People have been saying that since the beginning of time. But verse 23 tells us what Joseph was able to do. What could he do during this whole thing? Yeah, he could understand them. They didn't think he could understand them. To say that he had an interpreter is to tell them that there was this person that was acting as interpreter, and basically he wasn't picking up everything that they were saying or wasn't really speaking. So they didn't think that he could understand what they were saying. He had brought them an interpreter with him. And, at the same point, Joseph might have been a little rusty too. I mean, he hadn't spoken this language for 20 plus years. So I think I've heard quite a few people here being able to say that you can understand like German or Dutch or whatever, but not speak it as much anymore. Joseph might be in that same situation. But understanding them did help him know that they had recognized their sin, know that they were deserving of punishment, and that Reuben had tried to stop it. I bet that last one was helpful for Joseph, right? To know that at least one of his brothers tried to stop him from being sold. I mean, I wonder if that gave him a measure of comfort. I think it did, because we're going to see what happens next. This affected him in 2 ways. At the start of verse 24, what did he do? Yeah, he turned away and wept. What they had said opened old wounds. It was bound to have an effect on Joseph. It seems like he went away because we are told next that he had returned to speak to them. And what's the next thing that he did at the end of verse 24? Who did he bind? Simeon. Binding him before the brothers emphasizes Joseph's power and authority and the reality of the situation. Even though he was deceiving them, he still wanted them to feel the weight of his words. Now again, usually the oldest brother would have been the one who was bound, or just the oldest person in the family would have been the one that was bound, because he had the birthright and the authority of the family. If you wanted to rescue someone, it would be that person that you wanted to rescue. The rest of the family would naturally want to get the oldest back. But Joseph just heard how Reuben had stuck up for him, had tried to save him from being sold. So I think he had just this immediate opportunity to return the favor. And so it was the second one that was arrested. He then had their bags packed and sent them on their way. What did he make sure was put into each man's sack other than the grain? Their money. So let's see what they thought of that. Verses 26 to 28. In fact, just look at verse 28. One of the brothers just found the money in his sack and tells his brothers about it, and how do they react? Yeah, their hearts fail them. They tremble. They feel like God is punishing them. Now, why would they react like this? Well, it's because the Egyptian official who accused them of being spies now had more reason to believe that that is true. He probably thinks they stole from him. For all they know, Simeon could be dead right now because the official discovered that he didn't have the money he was supposed to have. In fact, there could be a contingent of soldiers on their way to arrest them and kill them as well. After all, they told them where they lived, right? So this is a pretty serious situation. Putting the money back in their sack put the fear of God into them. The seriousness of the situation just skyrocketed. But it's going to get worse still, because the brothers get back and they tell Jacob everything that happened. Verses 29 to 34 are effectively just a recap of everything that happened. The only thing to really notice in that chunk of verses is that they didn't know who Joseph was. They keep referring to him as the man, the Lord of the land. Essentially, they're saying that this guy, this really powerful guy, accused us of being spies. Joseph is still anonymous. And then they empty their sacks. And what do they find in every single sack? Their money. Now, at first, they must have thought that just one of the sacks had the money in it. It's still very serious, but it's plausible to being a mistake. Now that every sack has money in it, there can be no mistake. This looks like intentionality on their part. And they knew it. And when the brothers and Jacob saw it, how did they react? They were afraid, and rightfully so. For all they knew, this little clan just made an enemy of the most powerful nation on the earth. And so Jacob rightfully leans into them a bit, berates them. He tells them that they've now costed him 2 sons, and they're asking to cost him a 3rd son. Because if they did bring Benjamin back, having stolen, quote-unquote, stolen this money, what's going to be the definite thing that's going to happen, most likely? He's going to die too, and most likely all the brothers in this case. Reuben, the problem solver, a fixer at heart, wants to correct the situation, but he felt like he needed to put up some collateral so that his dad would take him seriously. What does he offer if he fails? Yeah, that Jacob could kill his 2 sons. Now, to give him the benefit of the doubt, I don't think that he really wanted that to happen, but he did want Jacob to know how serious he was. What he was offering wasn't an idle promise. He was putting skin in the game. But did Jacob agree to that arrangement? No. After all, Jacob considered Reuben as being in charge when Joseph went missing, and again when Simeon went missing just now. Reuben's track record isn't all that great for Jacob. Adding to that, Benjamin is the only one left, meaning the only son left from Rachel. Jacob could not bear his loss either. The end of verse 38 says that he would grieve and mourn until his dying day if Benjamin was killed. So, no dice. This chapter closes with this family planning on just staying in Canaan. They've written off Simeon as good as dead, since it seems like they stole from Pharaoh. They have grain, and they're hoping it will last the rest of the famine. Of course, Joseph knows how long that famine will go because of his interpretation of Pharaoh's dreams. He knows they will be back. And when they come back, it will be in a much weaker position than the first time. They'll have to come back humbly because they think they're coming back as thieves. They're going to have to come back fearfully. And hopefully, they'll come back with Benjamin. So,
Why didn't they just pick out one of the servant guys and say, oh, this is my little brother?
Yeah,
And their dad would have been happy.
that's true. Yeah. Yep, because
Just that they could put somebody else in his place.
that's true. Joseph never knew what Benjamin looked like. But he might have known what some of the servants looked like.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
But I'm just thinking,
Yeah.
dad was so close with that.
Yeah.
This guy that looks
Yeah, the servant might have spoke up and been like, what are you talking about? Of course, if they were proven wrong, Oofta. They probably feared the consequences of that. Teresa was saying that maybe they just could have chosen a servant and said, well, this is Benjamin. But yeah, I think they were already too afraid to even attempt that.
They also claimed that they were honest, and yet they weren't honest with their Bible regarding Joseph.
Right. Yep.
Or after that.
Of course, that kind of happens though just in our own lives. Jolene was saying that they claim to be honest men, but they weren't honest when with their father about Joseph. But don't we kind of do that sometimes as well? At least I know I've talked to I've done prison visits, and they'll say I'm mostly a good person, other than this one thing, right? And so we kind of do just even in my own life, I can kind of gloss over things I've done wrong because I've done these things right, so I can't be a totally bad person, right? It's just kind of a natural thing that we do. And in this case, they're just trying to be like, we're definitely not spies.
Part of the test to see if brothers could have just went home with the gold or the extra money. Simeon was killed on the way.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean,
Yeah.
kept it.
Exactly. I think Joseph is putting like a multiple tiered test to them right now. One to see if his brother's still alive. One to see if they've changed their hearts. Leaving Simeon there, if they never come back for him, that's going to be just as important, I think, to Joseph's test as well. So, yeah.
Also realized they were going to run out of food again. Because he
Mm-hmm.
how many years this was still happening. So
Yep.
But the brothers didn't know that. They
Yeah.
went home to their dad and said, Simeon died, they could have just spent the money.
Right.
And then they would have had to explain that down the road that they didn't know
Mm-hmm.
that they were hungry for years.
Yep. And so the last time we've seen all the brothers come to their dad about a brother, it was just blatant lying. This time they're coming and telling as much of the truth as they can, as they understand it. And so we get to see something that they didn't know of, or Joseph didn't know of at the time. We get to see a change in their hearts that have happened too. And we're going to see that change continue throughout the rest of Genesis here. We've been able to see Joseph as he's changed over the time and how he's grown to be a man of integrity and humility. But other than a quick thing about Judah, we haven't seen anything really about the brothers yet. And so, we'll be seeing their change of heart as well.
I wonder which brother got to tell Dad that Joseph was alive, or how they explained it.
Yeah,
When did they really tell him what
yeah.
happened?
We never get to see that in Genesis.
I'd like to know.
Yeah, we never get to see them say, by the way, we lied. We sold them into slavery. Remember that new pair of shoes we bought? No. No, so we never really see them explain that part of it. Only that, hey, Joseph's alive, by the way. And leave it at that. So, but I don't know that. Oh, what? That, yep. Joseph's looks changed, but he was also probably in full Egyptian garb. Yep. Yep. And makeup and stuff too. Yep. And again, he was 17, right, when he was sold into slavery, and now he's 30 plus, 37, 35. And so I used to have hair when I was 17. We change over time. But yeah, and you don't expect it. I mean, he was nothing slave when they sold him, and now he's the most powerful person in the land. I mean, you wouldn't expect that. So, yeah, surprise.
Remember, Reuben was the one who said to his brothers, hey, let's do away with the rest. He was the eldest,
Mm-hmm.
and so he did what was more honorable than the other ones had in mind. Well, when we think of the eldest, do you remember the woman at the well? And who's going to cast the first stone?
Oh, yeah, John 8. Yep.
And then the youngest ones were the last to leave. The eldest one left first. He realized.
Yep. Yeah, they knew. The oldest ones left first because they had a better understanding. Yep.
And there was one other thing. Thinking of Benjamin being born last, I think God furnished that to make sure that Jacob had some company.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yep. Yep.
Pastor, how many brothers do you have?
I have to count. I'm one of 5, so 4 brothers.
Did your father show, was he, have any favorites?
Honestly, I don't think so. They always said that they would never have favorites. Always just tried to think if they ever did, but I really don't think so. No, they never played favorites.
It almost seemed like this was an accident waiting to happen.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, if one of my parents were just like doting on someone else, buying them all the nice things, I might get a little incensed at that.
But Jacob obviously had a favorite.
Yeah.
And he denied it, or
And that favorite switched to Benjamin after that, right? Like, he had Joseph as the favorite. When he went, he protected Benjamin next. So,
And the reason he had those favorites is because that's the woman he really loved.
yeah, Rachel. Yep.
That's the woman he really cherished.
Yeah.
You know, like our dad and mom, you know, one wife.
Or wives, that's a little dangerous.
Right.
I mean,
Very dangerous. Not just a little. Very. But yeah, it's true. I mean, they're just people vying for affection then, you know? Yeah. It's a good thing that, I mean, back in that day, polygamy was more accepted, more just understood. And so it's good that we've learned quite a bit, you know? Yeah. Yeah, you would think the firstborn would be the favorite, yep. But it was the firstborn by Leah. It was the firstborn by Leah. Joseph was the firstborn by Rachel. Yeah. So.
He was going to marry Rachel in the first place. That was his choice.
Mm-hmm.
Father-in-law did that to him first.
Yep.
The whole thing is like
but then they
unbelievable.
It really is unbelievable. But you know what? Again, we're going to come to the point where it says, "What you intended for evil, God used for good." I mean, even with Laban giving Leah, and then even Leah and Rachel giving their servants, you know, what they intended for their own gain, God still used for good. You know, the 12 tribes became the foundation of the Israelite nation, and I mean, the rest is history. So, yep. All right, well, that's all for tonight. Next week, we are going to be looking at, I said this morning, our next Equip seminar, the statement of faith, our statement of faith, and our bylaws. Basically, what do we believe and how we organize ourselves to live out what we believe. And so we'll be going through that for a couple of weeks, and then we'll be back in Genesis after that. So that's all for tonight. Have a good one.